It's time for Let's Chat with Russtek, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs just like you. When starting out, entrepreneurs often feel they need to go it alone, and I'm here to tell you that's just not the case. Entrepreneurs have a lot of questions, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Nick Russell, and this is Let's Chat with Russtek. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Chat with Russtek. My name is Nick Russell, and before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, be sure to subscribe so you can get all the latest information and all the value that we have to offer. Now, with all that out of the way, I want to talk about telling stories and providing value. Okay. Now, when I was at the beer store, like I've said before in podcasts, I was labeled as the quote unquote beer guy. I was the guy that everybody brought up to engage with the customers and talk about all the different beers and help them make a decision on what beer they wanted, what beer to try, trying to be as brewer neutral as possible. But I was always engaging with the customers. And I didn't realize it back then, but I was actually being a salesman. I was actually selling to my customers back then. Now, when I get that term selling, salesman in my head, I hate that term. I'm not a salesman. I don't want to be a salesman. I'm not a car salesman or whatever else, right? But what I do love is I love engaging with my clients, with my customers, with my audience. And I love providing value to them. So in a way, what I was doing at the beer store, engaging with my customers, I was and still am very passionate about the craft beer industry, about the beer industry in general. And I knew a lot about the product. So it was easy for me to quote unquote sell the products that we had and help them make a decision on what was best for them. So if they wanted to try something and they wanted to have marinate a steak and wanted to have something, so I would talk about the different darker beers maybe, or if they're having a chicken dinner or something like that, and the different beers that would pair well with that. So I would have that conversation with them. Now, fast forward to actually just a couple weeks ago, one of my really close friends here in Windsor, she's one of our local beer reps, and she's been to a few different breweries. And I've been telling her for years that she is hands down the best beer rep in the Windsor, Essex, Chatham area. Hands down the best. Now, every time we've talked, she doesn't see herself as a salesperson. She doesn't see herself as being good at selling. But like what I did at the beer store, she's very passionate and she's very knowledgeable about the whole beer industry, especially the craft beer industry, that as she talked to all of her customers and all of her clients in all of the different bars and restaurants and all that, her passion did the selling for her. Her knowledge of the product did the selling for her. And it wasn't until she was just telling me the story last weekend, actually, she was at a wedding show with her current employer, with the current brewery she's with, and they were selling their products to be sold at wineries or at weddings. And she still doesn't think she's good at selling. And somebody there had said the same thing that I had told her. It's all about engaging with your customers, with your audience, with your clients, telling stories and being passionate about it. And that's where that selling comes from. So she doesn't have to necessarily sell and as the typical way to do it, but her passion, her knowledge for the industry and the product did that for her, right? And that's kind of cool. In the Expert Secrets book, Russell talks about the Epiphany Bridge script. Okay. Now, the Epiphany Bridge script uses that kind of form of selling. So you really want to start with emotion and storytelling in order to bridge that gap with your customers before you start selling product. So if I'm trying to sell you a car, for example, or if I'm trying to sell you this Samsung phone, if I want to sell you this Samsung phone, I'm going to talk about bring emotion to it. What could I use to sell this phone that brings emotion? If I wanted to sell you one of the Blackberries like that I have behind me in my office, well, not those. Those are permanently displayed and they'll never work again because they're taken apart. But if I wanted to sell you a Blackberry, I'm going to lead off with some emotion, and I'm going to make that relate to you. Kind of like with my Blackberry story, when I've talked about selling that and saying nobody wants to buy a Blackberry, but I have all of this stuff on here. You have all these contacts, all these courses, blah 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 blah. I kind of make it relatable to you, add some value to it, and then I'll use that as a way to sell, right? And then from there, that's kind of where you start creating that bridge. You start building that relationship and that trust. So that way your audience knows that they can trust you and they know that what you're selling is going to work for them. That's when you can kind of transition into using logic and providing value to your audience in order to start selling your product. Now, one of the cool things that you can add to all of that is, like I talked about in that Blackberry story, was adding an offer stack. You know, I'm going to give you this Blackberry, or I'm going to sell you this Blackberry. Well, not this Blackberry. This is my, if you're listening on the podcast, I have my Samsung. But if I was selling you even just a Samsung, you know, it's a little bit older. It's the S20 FE. There's the S21s are out. The S22 just come out. So it's a little bit older and it's not worth nearly as much. But if I said I had all of the top marketers on here, you could text them right away and get feedback. All you have to do is say you knew me. Okay, that's one huge bonus that adds value. And then if I said, well, not only that, I'm going to have all of the courses I've ever bought, thousands of dollars worth of courses, all of the PDFs, all the presentations, all the notes are on here as well. And like I could just list all the features that I would give, and I'd stack up that offer. You know, this would be worth this. This would be worth this. But you're going to get all this for. We'll do an auction. You know, you're going to pay me $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, whatever the case may be, right? So once you start tying in some emotion to what you're selling, all that passion, all that knowledge that you have, make it relatable to your audience. That'll kind of start building that relationship with them. So that way you can bridge the gap, start providing value and using logic into whatever it is your audience needs. And then that's where you can kind of add the offer stack. We don't even have to have the offer stack, but that's just an extra added bonus to help you to sell your product or your service to your audience. So hopefully that made a lot of sense to you. Hopefully that's something that you can use in your business to sell. But if you want to know more, want to learn more about this, believe me, Russell talks about it in depth in the Expert Secrets book. And like I've said in the past, that book is completely free. All you have to do is pay for the shipping. To the US, I believe it's $7. For us to get it shipped here in Canada, I believe it was like $12, $15-ish, something like that. But even that $15 shipping for the free book, that's something that Russell uses to coach his clients. And he charges $10,000 to coach his clients. He uses the frameworks that are in that book. So to me, that's a no-brainer. So the link will be in the description of this podcast, as well as a little bit more info just after I stop babbling on here. So hopefully you got enough out of this podcast. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and hopefully that the Epiphany Bridge is something that you could use in your business to help selling your product or your service. So with that said, I hope you guys have a great week. I hope you got a lot out of this. And as always, we'll chat with you again next week. Hey, everybody, hold up one quick second. Just give me 30, 40 seconds of your time before you head out and do whatever it is you have to do. I want to talk to you about Expert Secrets. Now, you've heard me talk about different strategies, different frameworks in the last few weeks, and even at the end of this podcast. Now, Expert Secrets is the second book that Russell Brunson wrote. And this book helps you tell your story, as well as helps you really find your audience. Now, the cool thing about Expert Secrets is the framework Russell used to write this book is what he uses to teach and what he uses to coach his clients. Now, when Russell Brunson coaches you, that's $10,000 per coaching session. And he uses Expert Secrets for that. Now, you can get Expert Secrets absolutely free. All you have to do is pay for shipping. So if you click the link in the description of this podcast, that is yours absolutely free. You just have to pay for shipping. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast you just listened to, and I can't wait to chat with you again next week.